The other day, I had the chance to sit down with Mandy Andress, the Chief Information Security Officer at Elastic. With more than 25 years of experience at the crossroads of business, technology, and cybersecurity, Mandy has a unique perspective on how the threat landscape is evolving. In our conversation, we unpack Elastic's new global threat report, what's different this year, the biggest trends shaping threat detection, plus Mandy's advice for CISOs who want to stay ahead and build real cyber resilience in the year ahead. Stick around, this one is full of sharp insights and practical takeaways. Mandy, it's so good to meet you today. I'm really excited about our conversation. First of all, can you give me an overview of Elastic and your role?
Absolutely. First, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation. Now, for folks, I am the CISO at Elastic, overall accountability for all of the information security, cybersecurity, product security functions within the company. But Elastic overall, also known as the Search AI company, focuses on allowing organizations or users just to be able to turn data into answers, actions, outcomes, using AI as the core of that. Used by over 50% of the Fortune 500, and then using that core Search AI platform as the base for our out-of-the-box solutions.
Amazing. Now, we're here to talk about Elastic's annual Global Threat Report. Why is it so important?
So the Global Threat Report, this is the fourth year that Elastic has published it, published by our Elastic Security Labs group. And the report is based on more than 1 billion data points that we receive from the deployed components of our product, whether it's solutions, whether it's endpoints, things that our customers enable to send telemetry back to us. And so it allows us to really dig into the details of various tools, tactics, procedures, TTPs in the threat landscape commentary. The report focuses from June 2024 to July 2025 and shows what are we seeing in the world overall? How have things evolved from what attackers are focusing on? As a security leader, how do I take that information? How do I take that understanding of what's evolving in the threat landscape, in adversary tactics, and be able to then adjust the program to make sure that we're being as effective as possible in defending the organization? And so I look at global threat reports like this as key inputs into our overall security strategy.
Super important. Now, what I want to find out is, how is this year's report different from last year's report? Can you tell us a little bit more, and can you let us know what are the top 3 key findings?
Absolutely. There are, say, 3 key findings from this year's report. First and foremost, something that we've been talking about and anticipating, but really saw it come into practice this year, was that threat actors are retooling for speed and really focusing on that immediate execution over the prolonged stealth period. So the advanced persistent threats that we've been talking about for almost 2 decades is now shifted to rapid execution, rapid data exfiltration, rapid activities, to where you need to be able to have strong protections in place, but very fast identification and then very fast response on an incident. And this year, for that first finding, really switches. Defense evasion had been the key tactic that we've been seeing the previous 3 years in the reports. So this is the first year we've seen threat actors move away from that and not care if they get identified. They recognize that they're moving faster than companies' defenses can catch them or stop them.
So how fast are you seeing them move? Are we talking seconds or are we talking minutes?
This is certainly minutes, sometimes seconds, depending on where their initial access point gets them into and what they're able to do with that. But yeah, instead of looking at days, months, years, we're looking at seconds, minutes. Anything really taking more than an hour is a very slow action in today's environment.
Now, an interesting finding from the report is that adversary priorities on Windows are changing. The tactic category of execution has increased substantially and now surpasses defense evasion, which has held the spot as a top tactic for, is it 2 or 3 years? Now, why are you seeing this happen?
Yes, it was the previous 3 years, defense evasion. And I think that goes to what we've touched on in the ability for adversaries just to be able to move that much faster, be able to adapt that much faster with AI as a base of capabilities, that they don't have to worry about being identified and stopped when they're able to operate at that speed with today's kind of defense environments that are in place.
Interesting. So that's the number one key finding. What about number two?
The second one is really focused on how adversaries are able to achieve that, why they're focusing on execution. So it's really the ability to apply AI into their processes, taking advantage of very basic malicious loaders, malware, things like that, tools that have been around for a while. It's the speed at which they're able to do that is what's making the threats appear different, or at least appear more impactful than they have. So it's not complex. It's not highly complicated, deep analytical exploits. This is using basic tools that are out on the market, things like Cobalt Strike, and being able to steal credentials. And how do we do that in a way that is just then democratizing the capabilities?
So why are we seeing this change?
I think a lot of it certainly is driven by nation state actors or nation state supported actors. But we also see a lot of the hacking groups and a bit more back into the hacktivist mentality. We had a lot of that in the early 2000s, and we're seeing that come back. And while it may not be for any specific ideology, it's just to make noise, to disrupt beyond any kind of financial gain or potential financial gain. We've seen ransomware evolve from pure ransomware, encrypt the data, get the decryption key, to double ransomware, both encrypt to make the data unavailable, data exfiltration to publicly release. And so it's all about disruption, and what does that look like, and what impact can someone have, and depending on their motivation, which is all over the place for different threat actors.
What about number three?
Third is really what we've seen in the news a lot, if you've been paying attention to the types of attacks that are happening. And it goes down to the point that identity is at the core of the start of all of the attacks. And it's really focusing on how do threat actors get that initial access. So it's all about credentials. Almost 2/3 of the security events, the credential access was the core focus and really what threat actors were going after, and then able to use those credentials to increase their privileges. And so it goes back to taking the path of least resistance. Why write exploit code? Why I'm able to go through some processes, whether that's phishing, spear phishing, looking at the dark web, finding data breaches, and using those credentials to sometimes just log in and be able to then move around the environment and take action. And so, as we always talk, that identity is the new perimeter. Last year, this year, we're really starting to see that, the impact of that and what it means from an adversary perspective.
Now, you have another interesting finding when it comes to malware. Can you talk to us about that, Mandy?
And so we talked about that credential theft, or using credentials as initial access as the key entry point. The key way that we've seen that happening is through stealing browser data. After 150,000 malware samples that we analyzed, more than 1 in 8 of them were designed to steal browser data and able to get the credentials and access through that. And what that is able to do is then create commoditization of initial access, and able to take advantage of, we talk about web browsers being the new operating system. So instead of in the past, we're stealing data from memory, authentication from memory and operating systems, now it's browsers in sessions. And how are you able to then take advantage and then either using them for their own access, selling them, and that economy, we used to talk about it being credit cards and PHI. Now it's OAuth keys, access tokens, API keys.
And then we have all of the social engineering going on. I mean, recently in the UK, we've seen quite a few attacks on retailers and manufacturing companies. Can you talk to us about that?
We'll touch on just that initial access piece is driven by credentials, whether they're gained through pretending to be an employee of the organization by contacting the IT team or the help desk to get credentials reset, using credentials that were disclosed in a different attack to target a specific organization. And we continue to see this occurring. Similarly, we had a drift security event recently, and that was the focus of the threat actors. They were going in and they were looking for access keys to be able to use in future actions, or to be able to just see where they might be able to get access or use that to broker some transactions for themselves for their next steps.
I think one of the things I found interesting recently came from Joe Tidy, a BBC correspondent reporting on cybersecurity. And he was talking about one group of criminals offering him 15% of a ransomware attack payout if he gave them his BBC credentials. And it's just so easy for criminals right now. They can go after any number of employees in a company. And when they offer incentives like that, then we're so vulnerable. What's your take on this?
No, absolutely. And it goes back for me to, we're all human, and whether it's technology driven or just core financial motivation for an individual, we all have, I would say, areas of weakness that can be exploited. And that's what we're seeing here. And so while credentials or technologies ultimately the way in, taking advantage of someone's current situation or financial motivation. I talk a lot about behavior science and the application of that in security. And this is threat actors taking the same approach and applying kind of behavioral sciences, human practices, human behaviors to move forward with their objectives.
Can you talk to us about some of the challenges you're seeing around threat detection? I'm really interested to explore legacy threat detection tools and get your view on whether they are fit for purpose. What are some of the challenges you're seeing, Mandy?
So we talked about execution being the key activity with over 30% of the malicious behaviors that we were seeing, and looking at execution as the new stealth, being things are happening so fast that teams aren't able to find them. They're not able to react. The legacy tools aren't able to identify a lot of these activities. Either they're not able to react fast enough and complete their analysis fast enough, or they're still combining some components. While there may be some machine learning based analysis, it is either built on models that still need to see things that are happening and then react and have models continuously updating, versus really just focusing on what's the core behavior of something, saying, hey, this doesn't look right, and taking action from that. So not having to know what to expect or having to know past patterns, we're able to be much more adaptive and reactive in real time.
What about the problem of alert fatigue? Are you seeing that really contribute to the problem?
Yes, I would add into that the false positives. We're just bringing in more and more data to analyze. As we've been talking, speed, scale are increasing dramatically for threat actors. And so we're well past the point where we're just not able to anticipate everything that a threat actor may be doing, and to write detection rules or write detection rules in a way that they are effective, and we're not having too many false negatives, but also not having too many false positives, which just creates noise and exacerbates the alert fatigue that teams are facing. And so it's how to find the balance to where you can have an effective incident response, have an effective monitoring team. And that goes back to behaviors and really focusing on behaviors. And what's interesting about focusing on behaviors, you don't know motivation. And so looking at that going forward, I think there's going to be some significant changes in just how SOCs and incident response teams act, and see a lot of silos coming down within organizations. Because from a behavioral perspective, you get an alert that this behavior looks odd. And as you investigate it, you don't know if it's a malicious actor. You don't know if it's just an operational issue. You don't know if it's just a new process that went in, then this is now going to be the new normal. And so as we have all of these processes and ways to route tickets, incidents, alerts through an organization, we're going to get to a point where we don't necessarily know what path it should take. And so I'm really interested in seeing how that evolves over the next few years.
think it's so concerning because you're talking about seconds or minutes to make those decisions. And one thing that concerns me deeply is that some SOC analysts are switching off alerts just to quieten the noise because they are so overwhelmed and they just can't cope with them. And so obviously when they do that, they're increasing the chance of a threat getting through. And that is such a huge problem for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Elastic's really trying to help teams with that through capabilities. And one that really focuses on the alert fatigue is a capability called attack discovery. And what that does is it triages alerts and combines alerts into a specific type of attack. And so a SOC analyst is taking away a lot of that alert fatigue analysis and having to combine and analyze and understand a pattern. It's AI, it's machine learning under the hood that's applying all of that. So an analyst can look at it and go, oh, this collection of 35 alerts looks like it may be this. Let me go investigate that. And so really trying to hone in an analyst's time to investigate something that looks highly probable to be of concern rather than trying to find the issue within all of the noise or find the 35, 50 alerts spread across millions of events that are coming in that need action, and being able to prioritize and focus efforts very specifically.
I love that. So that's where we're using AI to our advantage. We're combating cyber criminals and other threat actors out there. They're using AI on us and we're using it straight back on them. So it's really good to hear that. How else is Elastic dealing with these challenges?
So we touched on malware is stealing credentials from our browsers. And our Elastic Defend product, or endpoint security product, protects systems against that type of malware. And then continuing to focus on the behavior analytics piece of it. So the Elastic Next Gen SIEM integrated with AI is really helping teams move away from that discrete detection-based focus and be able to take more advantage of behavioral analytics, whether that's using things like attack discovery and AI to understand machine learning jobs, to be able to identify where you have kind of outlier processes, outlier activities that highlight you may need to investigate this. Because what we see a lot with things happening so fast from a threat actor perspective, you'll have volume spikes. And so being able to quickly see that there's a volume spike is a quick indicator of something may be happening and need to go investigate.
So that's keeping the humans in the loop, isn't it? And letting AI do the heavy lifting. How are your customers navigating the landscape using Elastic?
I travel the world, meet with a lot of customers, and of course, AI is top of mind and discussed at every meeting that I have. And it's really that focus on how do we evolve our security programs? What do we need to be learning, whether that's reskilling of teams, whether that's looking at what new technologies or evolution of technologies do we need to have in our team to be effective. And so customers using Elastic to move into that more behavior analytics, to move into a strong endpoint security solution that helps identify and block and protect their environment from the modern malware and at the speed in which we need to do so based on how quickly threat actors are able to focus, and then doing so in a way that best fits their environment, that's flexible, that's adaptable, and able to kind of work with their organization versus just trying to approach things one specific way, which can be something that's kind of working against the organization's overall operating processes.
That's where we really need the creative thinking to kick in, isn't it? I want to ask you, as a CISO, what advice would you give another CISO? I'm talking one-to-one. What do you need them to do? Or even extending this out to another C-level or board member?
Identity and protecting and securing identities, more specifically non-human identities, is a key target. And really investing and focusing on that, whether that's deploying from a user perspective, phish-resistant multi-factor authentication, having strong practices to manage API keys, OAuth tokens, using best practices, good hygiene around those. And then also, bringing it back to what we're seeing in the global threat report, beyond the focus on credentials for initial access, just really start moving towards a behavior analytics monitoring approach and be comfortable. There's a lot of, I would say, change management from a SOC team perspective because they're moving from something very discrete that they've defined to know if this virus and ABC is happening in my environment to something with a bit more ambiguity and being able to automate some things and bringing them the human oversight to investigate and understand what that behavior means in their environment and moving from I respond, I react, I get an alert, I react and then respond to I get an alert. Now I really need to investigate and bring some higher level analysis, more critical thinking into more skilled analysts being able to really get into an environment and understand what needs to happen or how to best react. And then lastly, browser defenses. It is something that I mentioned earlier that the web browser, the new operating system, we all work in SaaS solutions and everything's a browser app. And so how do we best protect that, whether that's malicious extensions that are getting more and more, whether that's browser stealing or credential stealing extensions or other type of malicious activities, ensuring that we are putting the protections in the right spots for our environments.
Finally, I have to ask you this as we're coming to the end of the year. What are your predictions for the year ahead? What cybersecurity trend do you expect to only get bigger in the year ahead?
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think as adversaries are starting to take advantage of AI and the capabilities it provides to increase their speed, increase their scale, I think organizations will be slower than attackers are evolving at the moment. I do think there will be a tipping point, maybe late next year, early the year after that, or sometime in the year after that, in that as defenders start to take advantage of the same technology, get that deployed in their environments and have near real-time action, trusting technology to be able to take automatic action, whether that's just to isolate a system to stop an active attack, but doing that in a way that works and best protects their organization. And so what I think specifically about next year is on the adversary side, because I have access to AI, LLMs, I can very quickly research, pull, whether it's social media, whether it's LinkedIn information, and create a highly targeted phishing messages, deep fake, that gets me that initial access, and then able to move around an environment from that perspective. And then defenders on the company side starting to implement and use technologies on their side as well. I think the biggest benefit that from a defender perspective we'll be able to gain is context is king in security and in AI, and it's often what we lack in today's environment just because environments are so complex, they're changing so quickly. Now we have a technology that can operate at the same speed and give us that picture and able to analyze very rapidly, what does this mean in the context of our environments, and able to take appropriate action versus having to have a predefined action that we have to have today.
That's brilliant. That is such good advice. The other thing I would add is to train your employees. I'm forever talking about this, and I know this is close to your heart too. So make sure that you're upskilling them, make the environment psychologically safe, and then they will become your greatest shield. Thank you so much, Mandy, for sharing your expertise and giving us a deeper understanding of Elastic's 2025 Global Threat Report. Your insights on the latest trends, challenges, and innovations shaping the threat landscape are invaluable. Can you tell us where can we find Elastic's Global Threat Report?
Absolutely. So Elastic's website, elastic.co, more specifically into the Elastic Security Labs component.
And can people come and find you on LinkedIn if they want to have a conversation and dig in a little bit deeper?
Absolutely.
Thanks again, Mandy. I really enjoyed speaking to you today.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed chatting with you as well.